but it's just as deadly to your company's reputation and bottom line. So what I'm suggesting out of this is not to frighten you into where you say, look, I just want to be a hermit now. Thanks a lot, Steve. I really appreciate your presentation today. I'm quitting my job and I'm going to be, just go up to the Cordilleras and just live in the mountains. These are things that we can handle if we just think ahead. What do you do if you see this? Your crisis management plan and your practice needs to include how do you deal with information, not just the media, because these guys are not paid media people. They're not going to have microphones like what I've got right here that say ABS-CBN on it. There isn't the big truck that says ABS-CBN on it with that big tall tower broadcasting back. These guys are able to reach out around the world with something that they carry on their belts. You need to be ready for that. And then, here's a big problem that my company has seen too many times in our opinion. Companies are not serious about crisis management. They look at it as maybe a just something. Well, we have to do it. We have to have something on our the board wants to see something on our business plan about how we're going to deal with crisis management. So they kind of come into the office space and they see a young up-and-coming potential manager, whether it's male or female, and they say, okay, well, you're the crisis manager, crisis team leader. Here you go. And again, it doesn't matter whether it's a he or a she, but he says, well, but boss, I don't know anything about crisis management. Doesn't matter. What are the chances of this happening? Here's a box of books. Read these. Now, when I was searching for pictures that would fit the point that I was trying to make, I happened to come up with this one that happened to have a young woman on it, carrying the box of books. But it doesn't matter whether it's male or female. The point is, too many times we don't think about the seriousness of the impact of a crisis. We roll the dice and hope that a crisis will never happen. And so we just go through the motions. And so we designate someone who isn't prepared and doesn't have the experience. She's probably a very nice person and a very good person who cares, but she doesn't have the experience yet to be able to handle it. Mind is going a mile a minute is not the time to figure out how you're going to interact, especially when you start dealing with strong egos, which I realize that none of us in this room have strong egos. But having been in these situations before, if you understand what a shark looks like, has that big fin that comes, what they call the dorsal fin that comes out, all of a sudden under these shirts and blazers and things, you start seeing dorsal fins pop up. The sharks are out there. And we've got to learn how to work together. Get our egos to work together to solve the crisis for the company, for the group, to save lives. That's what these people want. They have information, they have resources, they have what they need. It's well put together, and they're working together. They're talking. I would suggest because they've practiced this. Now, I don't know the respective roles of the people within this group, but I'm also going to suggest that everyone who has a decision-making, guys being non-gender specific, are too busy to participate in the crisis management practice, but yet they're responsible, so that when a crisis actually happens, they come in, and the rest of the teams work together, but now you have this other player that they're not really familiar with. It doesn't work very well. Everyone who has a decision-making role and who has a responsibility has got to be part of the practices. I don't want a show of hands right now, but I'm going to ask a question. Where is your crisis management plan? Do you know where it is? And you say to yourself, yeah, I know where it is. And I actually, I kind of joke when I say this, but Steve, I got it. I know exactly where my crisis management plan is. It's right there above my desk. And in fact, I'll show you. It's right here. Here it is. This plan is great. We did a lot of work on this plan, Steve. It's really, really good. In fact, it's so startling the other day when I realized what happens if I'm in Singapore. Car wreck. My wife and I are dead. My daughter is in the back seat. She survives. And I'm thinking to myself, no problem. My parents just fly up from Australia and they can take my daughter. No. Singapore is an independent country. The will and other legal documents that you have in Australia have no force and effect in Singapore, or in Philippines for that matter. Therefore, he says, I finally realized my daughter is an orphan, which means she's short, very quick, very sweet. Things get done, if we think ahead. For expats also, they need to make sure that their passports are up to date, that their other legal documents are up to date, that their visas, so that in case there's an evacuation, say, for example, Australia or New Zealand call for an evacuation of all New Zealand residents, citizens. Now the guy's got to go home and he's got to say, oh, where's my passport? I don't know. He isn't leaving unless New Zealand government pays for their trip back home. Unless you can prove you're a New Zealand citizen, you're not going. Immigration here won't let you out. You got to know where these things are. Power of attorney. What happens in case of a major incident, crisis, now you can't speak. You're injured. You want to make sure that someone can take care of things for you. And succession plans. This is especially true for the company, including an alternative command structure. And I should have put actually alternative command structures in plural. Because one of the things that we've got to worry about, again, I'll use Mr. Ayala's name in vain, but okay, we've got Mr. Ayala comes in. We're blessed here. We don't really have to worry about, probably don't have to worry about cold. It gets chilly in Baguio, but it doesn't get cold. We're going to have to worry about frostbite and so on. But we may want to remember that crises don't coordinate with each other. Yesterday we did an earthquake drill over in the Pioneer area. And right in the middle of the evacuation, as 1,000 people are coming down the stairs to evacuate, an incredible rainstorm moved through. Well, what we did was we shifted, instead of making them go to the outdoors evacuation site, we just had them go down into the basement of the building and cause some concern real quick. But that was a good illustration to us. Crises don't coordinate. What if you get an earthquake and a typhoon at the same time? Oh, wow, that's going to be terrible. That's exactly right. Wow. You can expect a fire after an earthquake. We've got a plan for that, but what if we have these other incidents? Now, many of us have matches and candles and so on, but one of the things I'm going to suggest is be careful with those because of gas leaks. Make sure that there aren't gas leaks, especially if you have an LPG tank in your home where you're hooked up to natural gas. Not saying don't use it, I'm just saying be careful with it and understand some of the hazards that may come from matches and candles. And keep an eye on the candles so that they don't cause a fire, that they're away from burnable materials. Make sure that you have an adequate first aid kit. I've seen some hardware stores will sell first aid kits that are about the size of maybe a BlackBerry or something. It's got like 2 Band-Aids in it. In my wallet, I carry 2 Band-Aids all the time because I get paper cuts from time to time or something like that. That's not adequate. A first aid kit that looks something like that, that's a nice size, make sure it's in the office, make sure it's at your home as well. But it's nice to have a nice kit, but you've also got to know how to use it. At yesterday's exercise in the Ortigas area, the Rizal chapter of the National Red Cross, Philippine National Red Cross, really did a nice job, really first class.
I think also sometimes when you have first aid kit, the medicine inside will be expired already.
That's a great point. As part of the planning process, as part of your practicing process, make sure that when I say adequate, make sure not only does it have good stuff in it, but the stuff is good, that it's still valid. It hasn't expired. If it's expired or even close to being expired, get rid of it. The last thing that you want to do is to put ointments or something that are expired, because that can actually be a hazard to diseases that way. I'm going to suggest that if you've got a pet, you're responsible for that pet. You've got to take care of him or her, whether it's dogs or cats or birds or whatever. They're depending on you, just almost as much as the infant is, and in some ways actually even more. As you prepare your home and office, take a look around. Look at all of the different threats that are out there, if you want to call them that, the potential for crises. How do we reduce our risk? Sometimes it's a matter of just standing in the middle of the room, taking a deep breath, and look around. Are there things that are going to fall? Now the building, the home is starting to shake, it's starting to move. And he realizes there's this really, really heavy, it's like a china cabinet bookcase kind of thing, and it's starting to go, starting to fall. Now imagine as a parent, you know where that huge, heavy piece of furniture is going to fall. On your daughter. She's still asleep. She isn't getting out of the way. And you know in your heart of hearts, you just can't get there in time. And you're going to watch. And he says it was heartrending. But then another bookcase began to fall too. And he says, oh, he must have gone to the right church. I don't know what happened, but, well, I know what happened. The two bookcases came together and formed a tent over the daughter. If he wasn't going to the right church before, he certainly was after that event. I said, I'll tell you what, I'm a Christian, and I've been born and raised. I said I not only would go to the Christian church, I'd probably find a mosque and a synagogue. I'd be going there, and everybody would be getting money after that, because that was a miracle. He says, I know that. He says, now, calm and help other people to stay calm, because anger, fear causes us to not think well, to think correctly, to think well, clearly. Gather information, check for hazards. I have to be in the Enterprise Center, I'd be very concerned about evacuating the building until I'm sure of what's going on outside. Because frankly, I don't know whether the granite panels that are attached to the outside of the building, I don't know if they're going to stay or not. So maybe I want to stay inside the building, because that building's pretty decent. Maybe I want to stay inside until I know what's happening. Be able to articulate before you move. And then execute your plan. Implement the plan. Actually do what you've said you're going to do without blind panic. Those three words at the top of the slide are probably the most important during a crisis. Think, think, think. In case you didn't catch that, perhaps I should repeat it. Think. Where are you now? Where can you go? How do you get there? You'll hear that in another slide in a couple of minutes. It's called assessing. Now that's during our preparation phase, as we're developing a crisis plan, as we're developing and practicing our plan. It's also kind of, where are you now? As a company, What's the state of what you are right now? Who's at work?